On one of the coldest winter nights in years, Armin was sitting alone inside his small wooden cabin at the edge of a quiet town. The clock on the wall showed it was almost midnight. Outside, the wind was blowing so strongly that it shook the windows again and again. Snow was falling non-stop, covering every tree, every road, every roof. The whole world outside looked white and empty, almost like a place where no one lived. Armin had lived in this cabin for many years, and he knew how winter behaved, but even he could feel something unusual about that night. The cold had a sharp bite. The silence felt heavier than normal, as if nature wanted everyone to stay inside. He was preparing to sleep. The heater was on, the lights were dim, and he had already changed into comfortable clothes. Armin lived a simple life. He was not the kind of man who talked too much or went out often. After losing his parents years ago, he preferred living quietly, away from noise, crowds, and unnecessary conversation. His days were peaceful and predictable, but little did he know that this snowy night would break that routine completely. Just as he reached for the switch to turn off the last lamp, a sudden sound made him freeze. Someone was knocking at his door. The knock was loud, hurried, and almost desperate. For a second, Armin wondered if he had imagined it. After all, who would be outside at this hour, and in such harsh weather? The storm was so strong that even animals stayed hidden. People from the nearby town rarely came to this side, especially in winter. The knock came again, this time faster, as if whoever was outside was running out of strength. Armin's heartbeat rose. He tried to listen more carefully. The wind howled. But in between the sound of the storm, he could hear a faint voice calling for help. He walked slowly toward the door, unsure what he might find. His mind filled with questions. Was someone hurt? Lost? Or simply confused by the storm? When he finally opened the door, a rush of icy wind entered the room. And standing there, trembling like a small leaf under a storm, was a young woman. She looked no older than her early 20s. Her hair was soaking wet. Tiny pieces of snow stuck to it like small white petals. Her clothes were thin and not at all suitable for such weather. Her cheeks were bright red from the cold, and her lips were shaking so much that she could barely speak. Her eyes, wide with fear and exhaustion, lifted toward Armin. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. She tried to take a step forward but almost stumbled. Armin quickly held the door wider open, shocked by her condition. Her voice came out small and weak as she whispered, "If you don't let me in, I'll die. You're my only hope." Her words hit Armin like a sudden wave of urgency. There was no hesitation in them, no exaggeration. She truly looked like she was minutes away from collapsing. Snow was stuck to her eyelashes. Her hands were trembling uncontrollably. It was clear that she had been outside for a long time. Too long for a night like this. Armin didn't think twice. He stepped aside and gestured her in. "Come inside quickly," he said, his voice firm but gentle. She nodded, but barely managed to move. Armin supported her by holding her arm as she walked in. He shut the door behind them, blocking out the freezing wind. Inside, the warmth of the heater filled the space, but the girl continued to shiver violently. Armin hurried to get a large blanket from the sofa and gently wrapped it around her shoulders. She held it close, trying to warm herself. Her breathing was fast and uneven, as if she had been running for a long time. "Sit here," Armin said softly, pointing to the chair near the small dining table. She sat down, still shaking. It was hard for her to even keep her eyes open. Armin quickly went to the kitchen area and made a cup of hot tea. When he gave it to her, her cold fingers could barely hold the cup. Her nails were pale, and her hands looked almost frozen. Armin guided her hands around the warm cup, helping her feel the heat. "Drink slowly," he told her. She lifted the cup near her lips and took a small sip. A faint sigh escaped her, like a small relief after a long struggle. Her shoulders loosened just a little. Armin watched her carefully. He didn't want to bombard her with questions immediately because she looked too fragile to speak. Instead, He waited for her to recover a little so she could breathe normally. After a few minutes, she finally looked at him. Her voice still weak. She said, "Thank you. I didn't know if anyone would open the door." Armand nodded. "You shouldn't be outside in weather like this. What happened?" "Are you hurt?" She avoided his eyes for a moment, staring at the steam rising from the cup. It was clear she didn't want to talk about it yet. Armand respected that. He didn't push her. He noticed her jacket had a tear near the sleeve. Her shoes were soaked, and snow had melted onto the floor. Her fingertips had slight scratches, and her legs seemed tired from walking too far. Something had clearly happened, something serious enough to send her out into the storm without preparation. The girl tried to speak, stopped, and then tried again. "My name is Zara," she said quietly. "Armand," he introduced himself. She nodded softly, repeating his name under her breath as if committing it to memory. Minutes passed, the clock ticking softly in the silence. Zara began warming up slowly. Though she still trembled at times, Armand placed another log into the fireplace, letting the flames rise brighter and spread more heat throughout the cabin. Snow continued falling outside. The wind crashed against the walls, reminding them how dangerous the night was. Zara glanced at the windows nervously, every few seconds. It looked like she feared something outside, something more than just the storm. Armand noticed this but stayed silent. He didn't want to alarm her. As she began to breathe more steadily, Zara whispered, "I walked a long way. The cold was hurting my chest. I thought I would faint." Armand nodded sympathetically. "You're safe now. You can rest here. No one is going back outside tonight." For a moment, Zara closed her eyes, as if the feeling of safety was something she hadn't felt in a long time. She held the blanket tighter, absorbing its warmth. Armand brought a pair of thick wool socks and placed them near her feet. "You should change into these when you feel warmer," he said. Zara looked at him with gratitude shining through her tired eyes. "You don't even know me, but you helped me," Armand replied calmly. "Sometimes helping someone doesn't need a reason." Zara looked down again, her expression softening with emotion. She seemed to be gathering courage to speak but couldn't quite do it yet. The power flickered for a moment, the lights dimming due to the storm. Then the electricity went out completely, leaving the cabin lit only by the warm orange glow of the fireplace. The sudden darkness made Zara flinch, but Armand reassured her. "It happens often in winter. Don't worry." The firelight made the room look calmer, almost gentle. Zara watched the flames dance, maybe finding a small sense of comfort in them. Armand sat across from her, giving her space but staying close enough to show he was there if she needed anything. He didn't want to overwhelm her, but he sensed she carried a heavy story, one that had pushed her into the snow, one that still scared her deeply. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, two strangers shared a silent room, one trying to regain warmth, the other trying to understand the mystery behind a frightened girl who had arrived at his door on a night no one should have been out. Zara slowly exhaled, as if letting go of some fear. She looked at Armand again, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and unspoken worry. And though she had not yet revealed her truth, Armand knew one thing with complete certainty. Her knock on his door was not an accident. Something had brought her to him. Something real. Something serious. And that snowy night, everything in his quiet life began to change. The warm glow of the fireplace slowly filled the small cabin, spreading a soft orange light across the wooden walls. Zara sat wrapped in the thick blanket Armand had given her. Her breathing, once fast and shaky, had now become more steady, though her eyes still carried fear. Outside, the snowstorm continued its wild dance, tapping against the windows as if trying to remind them that the world beyond the door was still dangerous. Armand quietly adjusted the fire, placing 2 more logs inside so the cabin would stay warm for hours. He didn't want her to feel cold again. After making sure the flames were strong, he walked back near the dining table where Zara sat. He didn't sit too close, not wanting to make her uncomfortable, but he stayed near enough to show that she wasn't alone. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. Zara kept staring at the steam, rising from the half-empty cup of tea in her hands. She seemed deep in thought, like she was fighting between staying silent and finally sharing the truth. Armin waited patiently. He understood that people sometimes spoke only when they felt safe enough, and he didn't want to force anything out of her. Finally, Zara's voice broke the silence, soft and hesitant. "I know you have questions," she said, still looking at the cup instead of him. "Anyone would." Armin replied calmly. "You don't have to explain anything right now. Rest first. Talk when you feel ready." Zara looked up at him, surprised by his calmness. Most people, she thought, would have demanded answers right away. She let out a shallow breath. "Thank you," she whispered, as if she wasn't used to kindness. After a long pause, she continued. "I wasn't planning to end up here. I didn't even know this cabin existed." Armin nodded gently, encouraging her to speak but without pressure. Zara ran her fingers across the blanket, gathering her thoughts. "I left home. In a hurry," she said. "I didn't bring anything except my phone and a small bag. But I dropped the bag somewhere on the way. I don't know where." Armin noticed her voice shake slightly when she said the word, home. She took another sip of tea, trying to steady herself. She looked out the window, watching the snow fall. "I thought I could find help earlier," she said slowly. "I knocked on a few doors in the town, but no one opened. Maybe they didn't hear me because of the storm. Or maybe—" She paused, her eyes turning sad. "Maybe they just didn't want to open the door for a stranger." Armin felt a small ache in his chest at her words. He could imagine her walking in the storm, knocking on doors, feeling ignored and helpless. "People get scared on nights like this," he said gently, "especially when the weather is bad." Zara nodded weakly. "I didn't blame them. I just kept walking because I didn't have any other choice. The cold was so strong that my legs felt heavy. I kept telling myself, just a little more. But I didn't know where I was going." Armin looked at her with a calm, steady expression. "How long were you outside?" Zara pressed her lips together, thinking, maybe 3 hours, maybe more. Time felt strange. Everything was white. I couldn't see the road properly. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. Not from the cold anymore, but from remembering the fear. Armin leaned back in his chair. "You said someone was following you. Is that true?" Zara's eyes widened slightly. She hesitated before speaking. I don't know how to explain it. I think so. I kept hearing footsteps behind me earlier in the evening. When I looked back, I thought I saw a person. But then they were gone. Maybe it was my imagination. Or maybe it wasn't. I was scared anyway." Armin noticed she avoided looking directly into his eyes when she mentioned this. It was clear the memory frightened her deeply. He asked softly, "Were you hurt by someone?" Zara didn't answer right away. Her silence itself said more than words. She bit her lower lip, her eyes reflecting a quiet pain. After a moment, she whispered, "Let's just say, I didn't feel safe staying where I was." Armin understood that she wasn't ready to share everything yet, so he didn't push further. "You're safe here," he assured her. "No one can come in without me knowing." His words comforted her slightly, but the worry on her face didn't disappear entirely. It was like her mind was still stuck in the fear she had escaped. The wind outside grew stronger, and the wooden walls made soft creaking sounds. Zara flinched each time the storm hit hard, as if expecting something else to appear from the darkness. Armin noticed this too. "Storms make a lot of noise in this cabin," he explained softly. "It's normal. Don't worry." Zara tried to smile, but it was small and weak. "I'm not used to being in places like this. Everything feels new and strange." Armin chuckled lightly. "Most people don't choose to live at the edge of a town. But for me, it's peaceful." Zara wrapped the blanket around herself more tightly. "Peaceful," she repeated, as if testing the word. "I haven't felt peaceful in a long time." Armin felt the weight behind her words, a weight of something unknown but clearly painful. A few minutes passed in silence. The fire popped softly as the wood burned. Zara seemed a little warmer now, her cheeks slowly turning a healthier color. Her eyes looked less faint than before. Then suddenly, the lights flickered again, but this time they didn't come back. The cabin fell into full darkness except for the bright flames of the fireplace. Zara gasped, softly. Startled, Armand stood up instantly and grabbed a small lantern from the shelf. He lit it and placed it on the table, giving the room a soft yellow glow. "Power is gone again," he said calmly. "It happens every winter. The lines freeze." Zara seemed embarrassed by her reaction. "Sorry. I got scared. I didn't expect the lights to go out." "It's okay," Armand said kindly. "Anyone would react like that." She nodded and took a deep breath. After a while, Armand brought her a towel so she could dry her hair. She gently rubbed it, then gave him a grateful look. "You keep helping me without asking anything in return," she said softly. "You needed help," Armand replied. "That's enough for me." Zara lowered her eyes again. Her voice was thin when she spoke next. "Most people don't think like that." Armand didn't respond, but his silence felt comforting. Not awkward. He wanted her to feel safe, and she could sense that. Bit by bit, her shoulders loosened, and her breathing became normal again. The storm outside finally began to slow down. The wind was still strong, but not as fierce as earlier. The tapping on the windows became softer, almost like a lullaby instead of a warning. Zara watched the fire for a long time, her eyes reflecting its warm glow. Slowly, she began to open up more. "I wasn't running from the weather," she said quietly. "I was running from a situation I couldn't stay in anymore." Armand listened carefully, giving her all the space she needed. "I don't want to talk about all of it yet," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I needed to get away. I needed a chance to breathe." Her eyes filled with a soft sadness, but also a small hint of relief, as if saying the words out loud lifted a little weight off her heart. Armand responded gently. "You don't have to tell me anything before you're ready, but you should rest now. You've been through a lot." Zara nodded slowly. "I will. Just thank you, Armand, for letting me in." Her voice carried gratitude, but also a fear of what might have happened if he hadn't opened the door. Armand looked at her with calm reassurance. Anyone would have done the same. Zara looked at him, really looked at him, and shook her head softly. "No, not anyone." Armand didn't argue. He simply gave her a small, understanding smile. As the fire crackled gently, Zara leaned back in her chair, still wrapped in the blanket. Her eyes grew heavy. The warmth, the safety, the calmness she had been missing for so long, all of it slowly pulled her into a peaceful state. And while she closed her eyes for a moment, Armand watched over her quietly, sensing that this was only the beginning. Zara had arrived at his door as a stranger, but there was something deeper behind her presence, something that would reveal itself in time. Outside, the snow continued to fall softly. Inside, trust was beginning to form between two strangers brought together by a storm, a desperate knock, and a night that was far from ordinary. The storm outside continued through the night, though its strength slowly softened. The cabin felt warmer now, and the soft glow of the fireplace lit every corner with a calm, peaceful light. Zara, wrapped in the blanket, sat quietly, her tired eyes focused on the dancing flames. Armand stayed close by, giving her time, giving her space, and letting her speak at her own pace. Minutes passed in silence. Zara seemed to be gathering her courage, as if she was deciding whether it was finally safe to share the truth she had been running from. Her fingers played with the edges of the blanket, twisting them, untwisting them, showing her nervousness. Armand sensed she had something to say, something important, but he waited patiently, knowing that pushing her would only cause fear. At last, Zara took a slow breath. Her voice, when it finally came, was quiet but steady enough to carry meaning. "I think I should tell you what happened," she said, her eyes still fixed on the fire. Armand nodded gently. "Only if you want to." Zara looked up, her gaze meeting his. She drew strength from the calm expression on his face. "You deserve to know," she whispered. "You opened your door to me. You saved me. And I don't want to hide the truth from someone who helped me without knowing anything about me." Armin didn't respond with words. He simply nodded again, encouraging her with quiet understanding. Zara looked down again, her voice soft as she began. "I was living with my mother's cousin for the last 6 months." She paused, her fingers tightening around the blanket. "When my mother passed away earlier this year, I didn't have many places to go. My cousin offered me a room. At first, it seemed like a good place, safe, familiar." Her voice trembled slightly. Armin could see the emotional weight behind her words. "But over time," she continued slowly, "things changed. The house didn't feel safe anymore. There were arguments, discomfort, moments when I felt like I couldn't breathe." She swallowed hard. "I started feeling trapped." Armin listened carefully, without interrupting. Zara took another slow breath before speaking again. "I tried to tell myself it was just temporary, that things would get better. But instead, they got worse. I felt like I was losing myself. My mind was full of fear all the time. I didn't know what to do." She paused and touched her forehead gently, as if trying to ease the weight of her memories. Armin spoke softly. "It must have been very hard." Zara nodded with a sad smile. "Harder than I ever thought. I kept avoiding the thought of leaving, because I had nowhere else to go. No money saved. No home of my own. I kept telling myself that staying was easier than stepping into the unknown." Her eyes glistened with unshed emotion. The firelight reflected in them, making them look fragile, yet strong. "But last night," she continued, "something happened that made me finally decide to leave." She hesitated again, then chose her words carefully. "I can't tell you everything yet, but I felt unsafe there. Truly unsafe. I felt like staying even one more day wasn't possible." Armin didn't ask for more details. He could tell she wasn't ready. Instead, he said softly, "Leaving took courage." Zara looked at him with surprise. "Courage?" she repeated quietly. "All I felt was fear." "Sometimes courage is hidden inside fear," Armin said. "You still made the choice to walk away. That matters." Zara held his gaze for a few seconds, appreciating his words. Then she nodded. "I left in the evening," she said. "I didn't think about the weather. I just grabbed my coat and walked out. The cold hit me immediately, but I didn't look back. At first, I thought I could walk to the main town and find a place to rest. But the wind became stronger, and it was difficult to see anything. My phone battery died early. And then, everything became confusing." Her expression tightened with discomfort as she remembered the long walk in the storm. "I couldn't tell which direction I was going," she said. "All the streets looked the same because of the snow. I walked past houses, hoping someone would open the door. But every door remained closed." Armin felt a deep sympathy for her. He imagined her standing outside in the freezing night, knocking helplessly, waiting for anyone to give her a chance. It made him grateful that he had heard her knock when she finally reached his place. Zara continued, "After walking for so long, my legs felt numb. My hands couldn't stop shaking. I thought maybe I wouldn't make it." She looked down at her hands, remembering the cold that nearly took her strength. "I kept telling myself I had to keep moving, that somewhere, someone would answer." Then she lifted her eyes and looked directly at Armin. "And then, I saw the light from your cabin. A small light, but it looked like hope. I walked toward it as fast as I could. My feet kept slipping, but I didn't stop." She took a shaky breath. "When I reached your door and knocked, I honestly didn't know if I would stay conscious long enough for you to open it." Armin felt the weight of her words. He couldn't imagine being in her situation, cold, scared, alone, unsure if help would ever come. He said gently, "I'm glad you reached my door." Zara smiled faintly, though it was a tired smile. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't opened it. When I said those words, 'If you don't let me in, I'll die,' I meant them. I didn't say them to make you feel sorry. I truly felt like that. Armand nodded slowly. You don't have to justify anything. I could see you were in danger. Zara looked at him with gratitude. Thank you for believing me. Silence settled again as she took another sip of the cooled tea. Her hands were steadier now, but her eyes still held the heaviness of her past days. After a long moment, she continued, There's more I need to tell you, but it's hard to say all at once. My mind feels heavy, like everything is still mixed up. It's okay, Armand reassured her. Say it slowly. You don't have to finish in one night. Zara nodded. She looked down at her hands, turning them slightly to show the small scratches Armand had noticed earlier. These marks, she said softly, aren't from the snow. I got them while trying to leave the house earlier. There was a moment, a small moment, when I struggled to get out. Armand's expression became serious, but he kept his voice calm. You're safe here now, he said firmly. Zara lifted her gaze to him again. She could feel truth in his voice, and for the first time since entering the cabin, she looked a bit lighter, as if some of the fear had begun to leave her. The fire popped softly, breaking the silence. Armand glanced toward the window. He thought he saw a shadow move outside, but it was gone in the next second. Maybe it was just the snow shifting or the wind playing tricks. Still, a small knot of unease formed inside him, but he didn't mention it yet, not until he was sure. Zara noticed him looking and asked softly, Is everything okay? Armand forced a small smile. The storm is calming, he said, not wanting to worry her yet. Nothing else. Zara nodded, accepting his words. She leaned back again, letting her body relax into the chair. She was tired emotionally, mentally, physically. Walking through a storm, carrying fear for hours, and then opening up to a stranger, it was too much for one night. But something unexpected happened as she sat there. Being in the cabin, with the warm fire, with someone who listened, made her feel something she hadn't felt in months safe. Armand watched her silently. He could see how hard it was for her to share everything, yet she still tried. It showed her strength, even if she didn't realize it herself. He spoke gently. You should rest soon. You've been through enough today. Zara looked at him with tired eyes but nodded. Maybe just a little, she said softly. But before that, she paused. Thank you for listening. No one has listened to me in a long time. Armand's voice was calm and sincere when he replied, You're not alone here. A soft expression formed on Zara's face. For the first time that night, her shoulders eased fully. Outside, the storm slowly faded into a quiet snowfall. Inside, Zara finally felt the first hint of safety, something she had been searching for through the cold, through the darkness, through every step that had led her to Armand's door. She didn't know what the next day would bring, but for now, in that warm cabin, she knew she had survived the hardest part of the night. The fire burned softly in the fireplace, filling the cabin with a warm glow. Zara had rested for some time, leaning back in the chair, her eyes half closed. Armand sat across from her, checking the lantern's flame, making sure it would last through the night. The storm had calmed, but the quiet felt unusual, too sudden, too strange, almost as if the night was holding its breath. Armand stood up and walked toward the window. He gently wiped the fogged glass with his sleeve and peeked outside. Snow still fell, but slowly now, like soft white feathers floating down. The sky had turned darker, a deep shade of blue-black, making the world outside look endless. He scanned the area around the cabin. Nothing seemed out of place. No movement, no footsteps, no sign of anything unusual. Still, something inside him felt unsettled, like a tiny alarm ringing softly in the back of his mind. Zara noticed him staring outside, and asked through a gentle whisper, Is everything okay? Armand didn't want to worry her, so he nodded and said, Just checking the snow level. It looks manageable. Zara gave a tired smile. You're always checking everything. It makes me feel safe. Armand smiled softly but didn't reply. He knew he had to stay alert. Zara was vulnerable, scared, and exhausted. He felt responsible for her safety, even if they had only met a few hours ago. Suddenly, A sharp sound echoed from outside, like a twig snapping under pressure. Zara sat up instantly, her eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" Armin turned his head slightly, listening carefully. The sound didn't come again. But it had been clear enough. "Yes," he said quietly. "Stay here. Nowhere." Zara clutched the blanket tightly. She watched him walk toward the front door. His steps slow and careful. He unlocked it gently and opened it just an inch. Enough to look outside without letting the cold wind rush in. The air outside was silent, still, empty. Nothing moved. Armin closed the door again, locking it securely. "Probably just snow falling from the trees," he said calmly. But Zara shook her head. "I heard footsteps earlier today, before I reached here." Her voice trembled. What if someone really followed me? Armin didn't want to dismiss her fear, but he also didn't want to jump to conclusions. "It's possible," he said gently. "But we should stay calm." Zara nodded weakly, though worry still clouded her face. A few minutes later, Armin lit another lantern and placed it near the window to brighten the cabin more. Zara watched him with tired eyes. "Can I tell you something?" she asked quietly. "Of course," he said. Zara held the blanket close to her chest. "When I left the house, I thought I saw someone in the street behind me. A shadow. At first I believed it was just in my mind, but then I heard footsteps. They were steady. Slow. Almost like the person didn't want me to know they were behind me." "And Sane," Armand frowned softly. "Did you see their face?" "No," Zara said. "Every time I turned, I saw nothing. But I felt something. A presence. I can't explain it." Armin listened carefully. "Fear can make our senses stronger," he said. "But I believe you, Zara. If you felt something was wrong, it probably was." She nodded slowly, comforted by his understanding. For a while, everything stayed quiet. Zara leaned back again, trying to relax. Armin sat down, keeping his eyes on the window whenever he felt something shift outside. The noise of the fire was the only sound filling the cabin. An hour passed. Then another faint sound came from outside. This time it was different. It wasn't the wind, or snow, or branches moving. It was the deliberate crunch of footsteps on packed snow. Armin stood up immediately. Zara's breath caught. "Armin, is someone there?" He walked toward the window, lifted the lantern slightly, and peered out. The light didn't reach far, but he could see faint impressions, disturbed snow shapes that hadn't been there earlier. Footprints, fresh ones, leading toward the cabin. Armin inhaled deeply, steadying his voice before turning toward Zara. "I need you to stay calm," he said slowly. "It looks like someone is outside." Her face lost color. Her hands shook as she clutched the blanket. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew someone followed me." Armin moved closer to her. "Listen to me," he said, his tone firm but gentle. "We're not going to panic. The cabin is locked, and the walls are solid. No one can enter without making noise. And we have one more thing." Zara looked at him with fear-filled eyes. "What?" Armin pointed to a small device on his shelf. "This emergency radio." He quickly walked to it and turned it on. The static-filled noise came alive. "We can contact the local authorities," he continued. "They have a patrol nearby because of the storm." Quote. Zara watched him with hopeful eyes, but also with worry. What if the person comes closer before they arrive? Armin faced her directly, his voice steady. "I'll make sure you stay safe. I promise." He pressed the button on the radio and spoke clearly, giving the cabin's location, explaining that someone seemed to be outside. The officer on the other end responded quickly, saying a patrol was already moving through the area and would reach the cabin soon. Armin thanked them and turned the radio off. But before he could say anything to Zara, another sound came from outside, closer this time. A crunch, then another. Slow, heavy, purposeful. Zara covered her mouth to stop herself from crying out. Armin looked outside again. The lantern light didn't show anything, But something in the shadows moved just for a second. A shape. A figure. Barely visible at the edge of the trees. It wasn't clear, but enough to confirm Zara's fear wasn't just imagination. Armin stepped back from the window. "Stay away from the windows," he said gently but firmly. Zara moved to the chair near the fireplace, her knees shaking. The sound of footsteps grew louder for a moment, then suddenly stopped. The silence felt even scarier than the noise. "What is happening?" Zara whispered. Armin shook his head. "I don't know. But help is coming." Minutes felt like hours. Every sound felt bigger, every crack of wood in the fire, every gust of wind, every shift of snow on the roof. Zara sat frozen, looking around the room nervously. Armand remained close, listening carefully, his senses sharp. Then, faintly, he heard something in the distance: sirens. Soft, but real. "Getting closer." "Zara," he whispered. "The police are almost here." She exhaled shakily, relief and fear mixing together. But just as the sirens grew louder, another detail caught Armin's eye. Outside the window, just for a heartbeat, he saw the shadowy figure turn and move away, heading toward the trees, disappearing into the darkness moments before the patrol lights appeared. The police vehicle stopped near the cabin. Flashing lights bounced off the snow, casting red and blue colors across the silent yard. 2 officers stepped out, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they searched the area. Armand opened the door slightly and called out to them. One officer quickly approached. "Are you okay?" "We heard your call," the officer said. Armand nodded. "Someone was outside. We saw footprints. They were getting close." The officer glanced at the snow, shining his flashlight. Fresh footprints were clearly visible, leading toward the cabin and then away into the trees. "You did the right thing calling us," the officer said seriously. "We'll follow the trail. Stay inside and keep the door locked." Armand nodded. The officers moved quickly, following the footprints into the dark woods. Another police vehicle arrived moments later, spreading more light. Zara watched from a safe distance inside, her eyes wide, her breathing uneven. Are they going to catch whoever it is?" she asked quietly. "They will try," Armin said. "But right now, the important thing is that you're safe." Zara looked at him, her eyes full of fear, sadness, and gratitude all mixed together. "I didn't want danger to come to your home," she whispered. Armand shook his head. "You didn't bring danger. You brought truth. And now the right people know." The second police officer returned after a few minutes and assured them that the area around the cabin was secure for the moment. They stationed one vehicle nearby for added safety and promised to keep watch through the night. Armin locked the door again once they left. Zara sat down slowly, her hands still trembling. "I can't believe someone was really here," she said, her voice soft and shaky. Armand sat beside her, not too close, but close enough for her to feel he was there. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "Tonight could have been worse. But you're safe now. That's what matters." Zara looked into the fire, her eyes softening. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." Armand nodded quietly, his gaze calm and steady. "This isn't over," he said gently. "But you're not facing it alone." Outside, the snow continued to fall softly. Inside the cabin, Zara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: protection, calmness, and the warmth of someone who cared enough to stand by her. This night had been full of fear. But it was also the night she realized that hope could appear in unexpected places. Even at the edge of a quiet town. On a snowy night, at the door of a man she had never met before.